In Disney's Tangled, Rapunzel is kept in a tower by a controlling mother, Gothel, until one day a young man helps her escape and they live happily ever after. In the Grimm version though, the road to young romance is a lot more rocky. The story goes that Rapunzel lets down her hair so that the prince can climb it up to her window, but when the evil sorceress that guards her gets wind of what's happening, she cuts off Rapunzel's hair and keeps it for herself. One day, upon climbing up the rope of hair dangled by the sorceress, the prince finds the witch instead of his beloved girlfriend and throws himself off the tower in desperation, landing face first in a bed of thorns and thus blinding himself. Prince then wanders blindly for years until he finally stumbles into Rapunzel, who apparently have been living miserably in the forest as a single mother of twins at the time. Her tears heal his eyes, and then they live happily ever after. In Disney's version of Cinderella, she is stuck living with her evil stepmother and stepsisters after her father dies, forced to be their servant. With the help of a fairy godmother, she manages to go to a ball one day and meets a handsome prince. After the ball, the prince searches the kingdom for his mysterious beauty, his only clue being a glass slipper she left behind. When his entourage get to Cinderella's house, the evil stepmother locks the girl up and prods Cinderella's stepsisters to get their feet into the shoes. Now here's how Disney wrote the ending. The sisters' meaty feet simply won't slide into the delicate slipper. Cinderella breaks free, prove that she's the mysterious girl, and she and the prince get married. In the Grimm's version, however, Cinderella leads a miserable life, constantly oppressed by her sisters, except for one troubling difference. Her father is still alive and doesn't do anything to protect her from their torments. When the prince arrives at their house with the shoe, one stepsister wants the prince so badly that she cuts off her toe, while the other sister slices a piece of her heel to get into the slip. But the prince can't be fooled, and when the stepsisters defeatedly show up at Cinderella's wedding, two birds come down and pluck the young lady's eyes out. The end. A Disney movie, Snow White from 1937. A wicked queen feels threatened by Snow White's beauty and gives her a poisoned apple, putting a death-like spell on her. But a prince who fell in love with the young lady comes to her rescue and kisses her, freeing her from the curse. In both versions by Disney and Grimm brothers, the evil queen is assigned a cruel fate. In the film, she falls off a cliff and greedy vultures follow her to pick up her dead body. But in the Grimm's version, little Snow White, a wicked lady, has to suffer longer. She goes to Snow White's wedding and is forced to put on red hot shoes and dance until she dies. Even the Grimm brothers had a soft spot. It seems like they couldn't quite stomach the original ending of the Sleeping Beauty story. In their version, as well as the Disney movie, the princess falls asleep on a spell after pricking her finger with a spindle of a spinning wheel. Eventually, a prince manages to kiss her awake and free her from the curse. Still, in the Grimm version, it takes a whooping 100 years for the poor princess and her castle to be awoken. And most of the blokes who try to kiss her awake died a slow and horrible death by getting stuck in the hedge of thorns that grew around the castle. In Italian poet Gambasito Basil's original version, astrologers predict on the day of the girl's birth she will be put in great danger by a splinter of flax. Her father bans all kind of flax from the house, yet she still one day fiddles with a spinning wheel, runs a splinter of flax into her finger, and falls dead on the ground. Now, Basil's plot takes a very different trajectory. Everyone believes Sleeping Beauty is dead, and her father abandons the house in grief. Then a married king one day passes by and decides to enter the home, and can't get her to wake up. At first, he cries, but then he rapes her, leaves, and doesn't think about her for a while. After 9 months, she somehow gives birth to a twin boy and girl. When they try to nurse from her, they end up sucking out the splinter of flax because they couldn't find her nipple, and she finally wakes up. Eventually, the rapist necrophilic king decides to wander back and look in on the woman he thought was dead, only to discover her alive and with the children. He explains what he did to her, which somehow Sleeping Beauty finds totally acceptable, and promises to bring the little family back to his kingdom, mind you, where his wife lives. After the jealous queen attempts to cook the children for the king to unknowingly eat, tries to burn the Sleeping Beauty alive, and generally does horrible things, the king swoops in to cast his own wife into a fire and then marry the Sleeping Beauty. What a lucky girl. The Grimm brothers version of this story has made a generation of schoolgirls think twice before visiting their gran. In the tale, a wolf devours an old lady when her granddaughter comes to visit, tricks the girl and quickly swallows her too. Luckily, there's a hunter nearby who cuts open the predator's tummy in his sleep, lets the girl and granny out and fills the animal's stomach with stone. In the 1922 short movie based on Grimm's story, Disney doesn't get quite as graphic. There, a man instead of a wolf awaits Little Red Riding Hood at her grandmother's house as the granny is out running errands. When the Little Red Riding Hood arrives, the man tries his luck with her, but a young guy in an airplane rescues the girl at the last second, and the two of them fall in love. Hansel and Gretel. In Disney's Babes in the Woods, 1932, Hansel and Gretel stumble upon a forest where they befriend a group of gnomes. Suddenly, they are kidnapped by an old witch who wants to turn them into a spider and a rat. At last, the gnomes defeat the witch and rescue the children, but in the Grimm version, the kids don't just stumble upon the forest. Their mother convinces their father to abandon the two children there because there's a famine and the parents are too poor to provide for the whole family. Left to fend for themselves, the kids meet a witch who takes them in, but instead of helping them, the wicked woman locks up the brothers and spends days fattening them up so she can devour them. At last, Gretel manages to free herself and her brother, but only by locking the witch in an oven and baking her to death. But the story still ends on a dark note. When the children arrive home, the mother has died. Disney's The Pied Piper, 1933. It's almost exactly the same as Grimm's story, but it's likely based on a version by English poet and playwright Robert Browning, as they share a very similar ending. The tale goes that the town of Hamelin is plagued by rats. The Pied Piper is asked to lure the animals out into the wild with his mesmerizing pipe play, but the town denies him the reward he was promised. And out of revenge, Piper strikes up another song, leading the town's children into the mountain. Now, if it was left up to the German brothers, that would be the end of the story. The children would never be seen again. But Disney couldn't stomach a tragic ending and let the Piper lead the kids into a land of joy. Disney's Princess and the Frog 2009 differs from the Grimm original in just about every aspect. The film is set in New Orleans and revolves around a young woman who wants to open a restaurant. One day a frog comes along and begs her to kiss him so that he can finally become a prince again, and she eventually gives in. But in the Grimm story, the princess doesn't even have to get intimate with the slimy little amphibian. The frog harasses her to do favours for him, including that she allow him to sleep with her in her bed. This agitates her so much that she throws him against the wall, and voila, he turns into a prince. Thanks for watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, like and share.